we can then start our conference, and I'm really pleased to welcome Jérémy Lamri among us. Just a few words how we managed to get such a star among us, because Jérémy is among the most known and most respected expert in the field. And actually, when we have tried to get in touch with him, I was not that convinced that we could have managed to convince him to come to us. And I was so pleased to have his will to be totally open to our collaboration, to recognize our mission as a trade union. So I want really to thank you, Jérémy, for that. And when we have published the notice for this conference, the question that I got was, how did you manage to convince Jérémy to come? And I say it was so easy to, because we just asked and he has directly accepted. All this just in order to underline how important is the expert that we have with us today. I mean, I don't have to go through the CV of Jérémy. You know more than well. I'm really impressed, Jérémy, for what you have been achieving, how many books you have published, how many rewards you got, and especially your perspective on this specific file of artificial intelligence. Because it was for me a really a very good surprise to see what for us is crucial to be recognized also by you in your question and answer published on website, meaning especially solidarity. We work for solidarity. Solidarity is really the heart of our action. Everything that we do is aiming at developing solidarity. And another dimension that is totally in line with our mission is this idea not to be afraid of the future, not to wait for what could happen, but working for things being changed and a suitable future to happen. How these two dimensions, there seems to be a really moral dimension, solidarity, fairness, can be put in perspective with something that seems to be so just automatic as artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the source of fairness for our colleagues, for the staff, for the workers. They are afraid to lose their job, to be replaced by artificial intelligence. That is not so far perceived as a possibility to free time for something else. It's more perceived to be something that could jeopardize their job, their possibility to work, and it seems also to be more for those who are working on the less respected function, that artificial intelligence seems to be the way out. Those who seems to consider that their high level of work is not in danger, because no one seems to imagine that artificial intelligence could replace a CEO, but workers can, on the contrary, consider that can be a danger. And our artificial intelligence can also help us in working in our day-to-day work. Commission has established its own chat GPT for not going to the external one. There are concerns on protection of data. So we start today this cycle of conferences in this field, and we are really proud and happy to start with the best expert that we could manage to have with us. So Jérémy, thank you again for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cristiano, for this welcome. Good morning, good day, everyone. I'm really happy to be with you. I'm speaking from Paris now. And thank you, Dikra, for your commitment and our exchanges all along. When you told me about your trade union, about what you're trying to achieve, about what you're fighting for me, it was obvious that I was going to speak today, and that I was going to do it with an open heart. So you'll see in the things I'm going to tell you today, some of these things are expertise, some others are more opinions of something I believe in. And I tend to think that a lot of these things will reflect upon you, because I believe we share a lot of common values for a future we would like to fight for. When we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, nowadays it seems like we are talking about ChatGPT and that OpenAI with ChatGPT invented artificial intelligence. Those who know a bit more of the field know that AI is not something new. We've been talking about AI for about 8 years now, actually since the Second World War. Now, most people know Alan Turing, and Alan Turing is one of the first people to have worked on AI during Second World War, and he was actually working on the concept of a machine that would be able to take actions without any human telling this machine what to do. And there is this movie. It's called, in French, it's called Enigma, and in English, Imitation Game. And in this movie, Alan Turing is trying to crack the Enigma code, which is an encryption that the Nazis used to communicate. And Alan Turing needs to beat this code to be able to understand what the Nazis are saying to themselves. And he manages to do that by building a machine, a big machine called Alexandre. And this machine is able to do what no human can do. To break the code, a human needs at least a month of full-time work. And the machine can do it in a few hours. And it's critical because the code changes every day. So if it takes a month, it's worthless. Thanks to the machine, they can actually break the code, they can listen to what the Nazis are saying, and it actually helped win the World War in a lot of different dimensions. And this is, I would say, the first geopolitical action of AI. And of course, at the time, it wasn't really artificial intelligence. It was just barely a machine. But Alan Turing did not want to stay there, to stop there. And he thought of something bigger, more. And he said, one day we will be interacting with a machine, like chatting with the machine, and the machine will be answering to us. And we won't be able to make the difference whether it's a human answering or a machine, because it will be so realistic. He called that the Turing test. He said that one day the machine would be able to actually beat the Turing test. And at the time, artificial intelligence was just an idea. It wasn't a field. It wasn't a technology. It was nothing. So a few years after he died, actually in 1956, there was this big conference in the UK called the Dartmouth Conference. And in this conference, like 200 people gathered and say, okay, AI needs to be a thing. So we're going to make it a discipline. We're going to teach it in universities. It's going to become a job. We're going to research AI, and we are going to have engineers in AI. And the term artificial intelligence was created at that moment. And from that moment, they decided that the mission of people working on AI would be to beat the Turing test. This is very important because it actually shaped why and how we are using AI nowadays. For about 70 years, we couldn't beat the Turing test, because AI is like mathematics and the Turing test is about language. So how mathematics become language? This was a tricky equation. And on the calculation side, when it's just math, AI did good. Maybe you remember something that happened in the 90s when Garry Kasparov got bitten by a machine called Deep Blue from IBM. It happened in 1997. And actually, there is a bit more to the story, but it's not really the point today. But officially, IBM did beat the world champion of chess using a machine. And actually, in fact, we know that this is not really what happened because IBM cheated. But I mean, they made the machine cheat. What they did is that they hired the biggest chess masters in the world, and some of the hard moves were not played by the machines, but by this collective of chess masters who were actually thinking on how to beat Kasparov. And they had some data because actually the hotel room of Kasparov was actually listened with a lot of receptors and everything. So he was being spied during his training against the machine. But anyway, it doesn't really matter because history tells us that a machine did beat Kasparov in the 90s. and that from this moment, the whole world started thinking about AI, artificial intelligence, and a lot of companies started investing a lot of money. Let's take IBM, for example. IBM was in quite a hard market position. They were close to bankruptcy, and after this how we say this hold up, their market valuation actually got the highest since the past 10 years, just because of a communication coup. And when they did that, they realized that AI had potential, and maybe they could develop something without cheating, but it would take time. So they decided to invest a lot of money in machine learning and deep learning, meaning that a way a machine learns by itself to be able to do things that no human would be able to do. Well, at the time and still now, it's very relative, because actually these types of machine are able to perform very complex operations. But when you compare to a human being, let's say that a 3-year-old child will have more proper intelligence than such a machine. And this was true for a long time, until something happened about 10 years ago. And I would say that the world really started shifting about 10 years ago on the technology side. 10 years ago, the US, it's always about the US. The US were at war against ISIS, the Islamic State. And they had this really huge problem that ISIS was able to recruit terrorists on the American soil using social media and the internet. So the government needed the internet to be better regulated, to make sure that such messages would not be broadcasted within the US. So they went to Google, they went to Facebook, they went to all the big players, and they asked them, I wouldn't say politely, they were told to make sure that the internet would be better regulated, because it was a matter of national security. And what happened is that Google actually at the time had a lot of lobbying power. Google was in average about twice a week at the White House. This is huge. It would be just like any company that would meet our president like twice a week. That's what Google was doing at the time, but it was also working the opposite way. The government had a lot of power. And what happened is that Google was told that if they couldn't manage it within 18 months, they would actually be broken into parts, because they were under the antitrust law at the time. So they had this pressure. So Google had to find a better way to moderate the internet, and they didn't know how to do it. They had two ways to do it. The first one was with human moderators. Humans would look at the content every day and night, and take out the bad things. But the internet is too big, it wasn't possible to do it, and plus social conditions were unacceptable, because when you are a moderator of the internet, your average lifetime in your position is like 2 weeks, and after you burn out or you quit, because it's too hard, because your job is literally to see the worst things in the world every day. So it didn't work, so they tried to do it in Kenya, because they had this problem with the US authorities where they couldn't burn out Americans, but they tried to do it in Kenya. The Kenya responded thanks to the UN, because they have the UN for development in Kenya that is there, and that reacted. So the only way they could do it was technology. And to me, this is what's the most interesting on what we're living today with ChatGPT, is how it happened. First, it's happened because of this crisis of ISIS recruiting. And it was a political decision, a political pressure that pushed this innovation. And Google challenged all the engineers and researchers to find a new way for AI to understand text. And remember, it was 70 years after Alan Turing, but the concept was still the same. We need to beat the Turing test. We need to have a machine that is so good at understanding human text and answering like a human that we will be able to mistake it with a human. And the team that found the solution actually is the team behind Google Maps. You all know Google Maps. We're using it for GPS. And Google Maps, well, they don't do text, they do maps. But ChatGPT is closer to a map than to a text, than to a dictionary. When we deal with concepts and text, generally we do lists. We do long list of things. Well, they decided that it was not the best way to do it. For example, if I want to go to Brussels from Paris, I just look on a map and trace an itinerary and go from Brussels to Paris. But the thing is that with this map, I don't need to know the history of Brussels or the history of Paris or Lille to do the road. I just need to go through these points. So the engineers of Google Maps wondered, what if we could do the same way with language? So for example, what if we could link all the concepts between themselves, and whenever we want to express something, it's just a path between concepts. For example, what is the link between a carrot and a house? It might seem stupid, but this is how ChatGPT works. So a carrot and a house. Well, a carrot is generally found in a garden, and the garden is close to the house. Or the carrot is found in the vegetable soup, which is in the kitchen, and the kitchen is in the house. These are two different itineraries, but they work. And this is how ChatGPT works. Actually, that's why a lot of people think that ChatGPT can only tell you what it was taught, what was in its database, but it's not how it works. And you can try it yourself. Try to make ChatGPT speak about things that don't exist. For example, we have this famous example in the French education. We get to learn about a very old war called the Battle of Marignan. We say 1515. And when you say that to any French over 30 years old, you say 1515, 1515, and he says right away Marignan. We don't really know what happened there. We know that we learned that in school. That says a lot about our system. But what's important it's that you could ask the question, okay, how could the learnings of the Battle of Marignan teach us on how to apprehend the war in Ukraine today? This concept, like the fact of relating these two things, does not exist on the internet. You can look it up. You won't find it. But if you ask ChatGPT to do it, it will find an answer, and it will be a proper answer. Why? Because there is this big map of ChatGPT, and somewhere ChatGPT has all the concepts about the Battle of Marignan, and somewhere else all the concepts about the war in Ukraine. Assuming that the concepts he has recorded are good, he will create a map and will say, okay, this is what links these two concepts. So this is how I can teach you something about that. So ChatGPT is not a database. It's more like a map. And when you ask something to ChatGPT, it's like you're drawing an itinerary in this map. That changes a lot of things, because we say, for example, a lot of people say, oh, but AI cannot be creative. Wrong. The thing that you can relate these two concepts and it doesn't exist on the internet, this is creativity. Of course, for now, ChatGPT cannot create a new concept in the map, something that did not exist in the map. It can link concepts that are further from each other. And that means that the human added value for now might be to create new concepts. But because of how our education system works, less than 2% of the people are able actually to create new concepts. This is not how they're designed, because the system wants them to link things, to perform things, do things, not to create new things. I would say that as of now, AI is much more creative than most humans. And that's the thing. There is this movie based on a book called I, Robot with Will Smith, based on a book from Isaac Asimov. It's science, and it talks about a future where we have robots, like in houses and everything. And at some point, Will Smith is against the robots, and he tells the robots, robots are not robots are not alive, and robots do not deserve to live because they cannot create a symphony like humans. They cannot create an œuvre d'art like humans. And the robot just says to Will Smith, "Can you?" No, most humans can't actually, but it's not what makes our value. And we are reaching this point where we have AI that they are not sentient. They don't know what they do. It's just mathematics. They're just doing calculations and doing paths in these maps. But the values they start creating actually challenges us because it's closer and closer from what we would do. It doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. It's not because we can do it that we should do it. And I believe that this is a big reflection that you are having. But the point is there. We are in a trend, and it has been for the last 10 years, when AI is accelerating, and it's accelerating almost exponentially. AI starts being able to handle concepts and tasks that are more and more complex. And soon enough, it will be able to take, like in a given field, almost all the tasks of a job. So the question is not what will AI be able to do or not. I think that if we start fighting this fight, we will lose it. We must agree on the principle that potentially AI will be able to perform any task that a human can perform. When, we don't know. It might be in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years, but we must assume that it will be the case. Why? For two reasons. First one, because AI is improving. For example, if you don't know something or you have a belief or you're lying, you're mistaking, whatever, and you want to improve yourself, it will take years. When AI makes a mistake, you can correct the program overnight. So AI is improving much faster than humans can. So this means that at some point, people, these engineers and researchers, they will find the right algorithm, the right way to do it. And it will not be a soul, it will not be human, but it will be more performant, more productive. And please hold on to that thought, because the world we live in now, the narrative we live in with GDP and everything is based on that. So that's why we cannot win this fight on the long run. The second reason why we should agree on the fact that AI will be able to perform any task, it's for me a humanist reason. Just imagine the thing I hear the most now in HR and in trade unions and in executive committees is, oh, but don't worry. There are things that AI will not be able to do, so the human jobs will be there. Well, that's a very poor vision of humanity. Are we going to hide in the spots that AI cannot take? This is not how we could consider a society. I mean, if we just say, okay, AI will take most things, and there will be few things that will be human only, and humans will do that. No, it's not because technology can do it that it should do it. This is actually the debate we must open now. And that means we need to think differently. From now, we can think on two levels. The first level is what is going to happen in the 5 next years. And the second one is what's going to happen in like 15 years. So for the next 5 years, I would say it is quite easy to think of the different scenarios. And we can just stay focused on the world of work. So what will the work be like in 5 years if we keep putting AI everywhere, just like we're trying to do? So we worked a lot with my teams on these scenarios, and we have identified 5 ways of doing things. And of course, you will understand that some of the ways may be harder, more positive, but harder to reach than some others that are much easier. and I would say lazy. So the first way to do it is a way that already has started. So for example, AI allows to gain productivity. So for example, Dikra, maybe before you could handle, I would say anything. You could handle 5 projects a week. Soon enough, with AI, you will be able to handle 10 projects a week, and then 15, and then 20. Well, what is that? It's called making you a blue collar of AI. Because you will just be pushing buttons, AI will be producing, you will be producing always more value, and you will just be doing terrorism for white collars, just like a blue collar. So this is a scenario that already has started, where companies expect people to do more in less time. And when they do that, the thing is that the human brain has a way of working that has limits. You cannot ask too much from the brain in a too short time, because otherwise it's your mental health that is at stake, and potentially you don't learn and you start just producing and losing value yourself, and you become dependent on AI. This scenario is very risky, but I see a lot of companies going there right now, and a lot of administration that say, oh, but people can do more with less, so it's good. AI will be doing a part of their job, so they could actually produce more. A second scenario is a scenario where we say, okay, actually, with AI, we can do the job twice faster. So I don't need 100 people to do it now. I only need 50 people. So it's cutting jobs. This scenario is very risky for economy. And I believe that in OECD countries, this is something that is watched closely, because there is a systemic risk here. If we want to cut it short, our economy relies on the fact that people are consuming. They are consuming because they have some money to do it. They have some money to do it because they earn money. If tomorrow too many jobs are cut off, too many people that are laid off, they don't get that money, they stop consuming, and the economy gets broken. So the whole system breaks down. So that's why in France and in all the other countries of Europe, whenever we have this slowdown, this decrease in consumption, it's like a red alert. We need to make sure that there is enough consumption. So to do that, we need people to have jobs. We need people to get money. That's why a lot of companies are going to be tempted to do that, but it's dangerous. In the US, it has started for the juniors, for first jobs. It's much harder in 2025 for young graduates to find a job, because most of what they can do can actually be done by AI now. So a lot of companies consider that it's cheaper to do it with AI than hiring this Gen Z that cannot be managed anyway. And this is a verbatim that from something I heard in a US company. So it's easier and cheaper to manage an AI than a Gen Z. And the job done is the same. But this is a systemic risk once again, because if you don't hire juniors today, who will be the seniors tomorrow? Who will be the experts tomorrow? The people in 5-10 years that we need to have skills to work and create value in our society, they need to be trained. They need to learn the job. So that's why we have a responsibility, at least in Europe, to make sure that we keep hiring young people, to make sure that they become less younger people and more experienced people. The third scenario is a scenario that I believe we tend to like in France, but not everyone. This is the social scenario. It's a scenario when we say, okay, if with AI, we can actually do the things in less time and faster. We are not going to ask you to do always more. We are going to give you back some time, and you are actually going to have more days off. For example, this opens the way to the 4 days work week or things like that. In France, we have this situation. Like a lot of people want the 4 days work week or a week of 4 days paid like a week in 5 days. And of course, a lot of decision makers don't want that, because they say, if you only work 4 days, I can only pay you 4 days. It's economics. If I pay you 5 days to work 4 days, I kill my company. And the employees and trade unions, they want that, but it can't happen. So the boss says, I have another proposal. You're going to work 4 days, but in 4 days, you're going to produce as much as 5 days. So you're going to work longer hours in 4 days. So it's not going to be a week of 4 days, but it's going to be a week in 4 days, which is very different on mental health and on the job work conditions. So right now, the social debate is blocked on that in France. But if tomorrow, with 4 days of work, you can produce without more effort as much as 5 or 6 days using AI, then it reopens the debate. And working 4 days while being paid 5 days become possible. But to do that, it needs an actual social debate from the trade unions to make sure that it happens, because I don't know any decision maker that will pay someone for 4 days the equivalent of 5 days without asking for it. This is a very interesting scenario, and at this stage you understand that the scenarios are not exclusive. What we need to find in our society is the right mix of everything. Of course, there will be jobs that will be cut off. It will allow to renew something else. Of course, we will ask a bit more on the same time. And of course, we need to make sure that in this world of crisis we live in, we have more time to regenerate ourselves. But what I'm more interested in are the two other scenarios. The fourth scenario is the most complex one. And for you, for example, for your trade union, this is probably one of the only way you have to be able to convince anyone that it can work. In this fourth scenario, you actually become a learning organization. What it means is that you say, okay, we accept AI. AI is going to free us some time. It's going to open new possibilities, because with AI we are going to save time. So we have time to do something else. So what are we going to invest this time in? And the answer has to be strategic. It cannot be more operations, more of what we were doing before. It has to be new things that we were not doing before and that have more strategic value. So some companies want to go this way and say, okay, with AI, we're going to optimize what we're doing now. And the time we save, we're going to invest it for more strategic value. We're going to work on more complex projects. We're going to try to get new market shares, whatever. But it is a very complex deal, because it means that the people that are in the company need more skills. If you most of the time, if you go to more strategic topic and new projects, you need people that are better organized, that have better work methodologies, that are more skills on project management, on a lot of things. So it means that you need to spend a huge amount of time training them. This learning organization has a very particular setup. It's about 20% of the time is spent in training and development. It's like 1 day a week, you learn new things. It can be in a training room. It can be in a new situation. You go observe a colleague on another job. You are working on projects. You're not sure whether you're going to manage, so you're prototyping. So you are going co-development, coaching, I don't know, anything that helps you break your barrier and go to the next step, become a more complete human. So to me, this is a positive scenario. But to actually do it, you need to make sure that the time you save is not completely reinvesting in producing, but also in learning. This is very critical. And it means that at all levels, not just the people working on the field, it has to be everyone, the decision makers, everyone needs to be in the mindset where they are actually able to learn on the spot and learn every day. This is the way it can work. And my take is that the companies and the organizations that will succeed tomorrow are the organizations that can create this learning culture. We call them learning organizations. And a very healthy and human objective for the next decade is to becoming a learning organization. The fifth scenario is, for me, it could be seen as the cherry on the top or an essential one. So to understand it, we need to go back a bit in history, because it basically says, this fifth scenario, that the companies, organizations, they will need, and they will do it, they will give time away to other organizations or associations. In French, we call that mécénat de compétences, for example, giving skills. I don't really know the term in English, I'm sorry. But to understand that, you need to understand why. And the transformation we live in, I believe, will not create enough jobs to cover the people that will need one. So AI is going to cut a lot of jobs just because it is performing tasks in a much more competitive way. And in France, for example, we have this habit of preserving employments as much as we can. So we try not to have too many layoffs. And that's why we have this economy. For example, in supermarkets, we still have cashiers, and we don't actually need cashiers really anymore. But in a lot of places, we do still have cashiers. One, because some people prefer to have humans at a cash desk, but also because we actually need people to get a job. Otherwise, the French system relies on that. People who have a job actually finance for the retreats and for retirements and for people who don't have a jobs. So we have this social habit of preserving jobs, but I believe that at some point we won't be able to do it enough. And we don't need AI to take all the jobs to actually break the system. If tomorrow in France unemployment reaches 15 to 20%, it breaks the system. So, and I believe that this can happen within the next 10 years. So to avoid that, there is something I'm working on right now, a project of reform that is very ambitious, and I want to submit to a lot of politics in France next year, which is the end of what we call chômage. So in France, either you're employed or you're unemployed. And economically, that means you are useful or you are not useful. I believe in the 21st century, we need to kill that debate. It is not because you don't have an employment that you are not useful. You can be useful in a lot of other ways to society. You can contribute to a lot of things. So this opens the debate of the contributive economy that I call the quaternary sector. And the quaternary sector is like the vision I have for Europe within the next 15 years. When the tractor was invented in 1881, so it's about 150 years ago, every tractor was able to replace 400 workers in the field. Every tractor, because one tractor can do in 1 hour with just one driver what 50 people would take 8 hours to do. So every tractor could replace 400 workers. But these workers were actually requalified in the factories, because the same invention that allowed the tractor created the industrial sector, the secondary sector. So we went from one sector, the primary sector, to two sectors. And then in the 50s, when IT appeared, it allowed automation, the start of automation, and it also allowed to communicate on long distances in very short amounts of time. And that actually economically translates into what we call delocalization. because you can start paying people much cheaper at the other end of the world while keeping communications open. So in OECD countries and in Europe, it translated into disindustrialization. And that actually was not, it was a major issue, but we could actually create new jobs in a new sector allowed by ICT, which was the tertiary sector, services. And nowadays, in most European countries, over 80% of the active population work in the tertiary sector, a sector that did not exist 70 years ago. Over 80% of the active population. Now we have AI, and AI is actually challenging the tertiary sector because it's intellectual production. AI is touching intellectual production. And of course, it's going to automate even more in the secondary sector and primary sector. So the question is, when you start automating at scale, is there enough jobs for everyone? Probably there will be a lot of jobs open, but most probably, most people won't be qualified enough to take them. And so the answer to that is to say that in the future, we don't know when, we have to make that happen, but in the future, either you are in a job, you are employed by an organization, a company, whatever, or you are not in that situation because you can't or you don't want to, and then you actually have contributive activities. For example, in Europe, we have a demographic crisis coming with a lot of elder people that will need to be taken care of. Taking care of elders in a social way is a contribution that actually would deserve to be able to live properly. The concept of living properly is also something that becomes critical because in France, we have the minimum revenue. We call that the SMIC. And 30 years ago, you could actually live with a SMIC. Barely, but you could live. My parents raised me with the SMIC. And actually, it was possible. In 2025, when you actually earn a SMIC, you cannot live anymore. You just don't have enough money to go to the end of the month. So that's the thing. We need to transition clean energies, more sustainable worlds, blah, blah, blah. But how do you do that when you have a part of the people that think about the end of the world and most of the people that think about the end of the month? So this is the world we live in now, and this creates something that might not be manageable in the coming years. So we need to make sure that everyone can live with dignity, and that's the business model Europe must solve in the 15 coming years. Because I really believe that even if we can save a lot of employments, even if we can actually temporize, we can slow down the development and progress of AI, it will still not be enough not to break our model. Our model is not designed for having a technology that can compete with human skills. That model was not designed for that. So Americans think it's possible because they think of acceleration. They think that if we keep developing technologies over and over and over, at some point we will find solutions. I believe that Europe, it's not the US, and that we have values, we have a way of doing things, we have a way of thinking democracies, we have a way of thinking how the wealth should be actually splitted in our society with a better repartition. And I believe that as long as we will be living under the American narrative, this won't happen. So I'm part of the people that think that in the next 10 years, there should be actually a strong action from Europe to not follow the US narrative anymore. Just like the BRICS are trying to do, for example, get out of the dollar and everything. And I believe that most people don't think it's possible because we have been living mondialization globalization for 30 years in an accelerated way. But I believe that globalization is now struggling and that we are going to live the opposite, deglobalization, fragmentation of the world. And I think it started about 10 to 15 years ago, and I think it's been accelerating since the war in Ukraine. And I think that the choices we will make as Europeans in the coming years will actually show exactly that, whether we want to assume a certain model of development, meaning technology everywhere, or where we want to find an equilibrium between how people live their life, how companies and organizations work, and how we finance all of this. There is enough wealth to do that. We just need to make sure that it happens. For example, if I take the example of CSRD, which is to me a great European initiative, but that was slowed down for 2 years now by a lot of lobbies. I believe that the CSRD is a great way to introduce new indicators tomorrow, new KPIs, not just GDP, but maybe something else, well-being of people, environmental regeneration, and all the things. And I believe that if we don't fight for that, I mean, for example, if this trade union does not fight for that, I really think there won't be much to fight for in the coming years, because it's all linked. And as long as the KPI will be GDP, we will be living in that situation where AI will always be more interesting than a human. So I will stop there so that we can have actually some Q&A time.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I think that could not have started better this the discussion on this item with your historical reminder of the origin of the debate. I think that you have sent messages that they are, in a way, afraiding us. When you mentioned that we must acknowledge that at the end of the story, AI will be able to do everything, because so far we felt comfortable that AI could not do something that we could do, so we could still be important. Now we realize that we could just be useless. But then you managed to put things that seems to be, for some of us at least, totally outside the scope of this discussion. And we are so glad to see that for you, solidarity, social dialogue, fighting for rights, and taking care of the well-being, avoiding burnout are still the priorities. And then comes some of the questions that have been putting by the colleagues in the chat. How can we remain competitive with countries for which these values are just not relevant? I don't want to mention those, but I'm not sure that in China, for example, social dialogue or trade unions, well-being are on top of their priority. So can we afford the price of staying what we are with our values, with our solidarity? That is the question that is raised.
Thank you, Cristiano, for this question. And it's a very important one because it's actually a systemic question. So competitivity is not just a one-way equation. For example, take the US as of now. So yes, the US are very competitive, they are very aggressive, but they are also at the, how we say, they are close to collapse. They are close to civil war. They are close to imploding. And what's the point of being that competitive if it doesn't last? So I believe that we can find another way of being competitive. I believe that our way of being competitive is being sustainable. And for example, we take China. I think that China knows that. And I think that China will be more sustainable than the US soon enough. Because the US, what they do now is that they pollute and they do a lot of things just for the sake of competitivity. For example, China has a plan. And when you say social rights and everything in China, well, still the same systemic equation. When in Europe you have minds that are free, that people that you actually respect, care for, it unleashes their creativity, their ability to find solutions, new idea, commitment. They are not forced to. They do it because they believe in it. If we nurture that in Europe, we will fight for things and we will actually find ways to do things. And I believe that there are several ways of thinking competitivity. What we need to make sure of is that we are Europe, but we are not alone. Who are the allies that will actually share the visions that we have tomorrow? And if we are strong enough and we have big enough allies that are like-minded, then competitive will not be the issue. We will be.
Yeah, we hope so. Another interesting question that is raised is also linked to what you just mentioned about the fact that in the States are the younger that are not recruited and replaced by the AI, while the perception is that the young generation are the most in favor of AI, not only because they cheat on the school for their work, but also for the idea that they are more familiar. So it's a bit a contradiction to see that those who are more in favor are actually more the victim of the system. One colleague was mentioning that yes, we can replace cashiers with a machine, but still there are people that want to get in touch with humans. And it's also true that if you go to any supermarket, you see older people going to the human cashier and perhaps young people going more to the machine. So how can we put in perspective the difference between the generations? Some of them are just born with IT dimension, some other are just blocked by their smartphone. So how can we have this global approach, this solidarity and sharing of knowledge?
I think that thank you, because I think the answer is in your question anyway, and you know it. But of course, solidarity is the answer. But if we are looking at the use of AI, say, of course, for young people, for people who like are in school or are going to leave school, they all use the AI to do their homeworks. That's a fact. And that's why in June you have a massive drop in the use of ChatGPT, because it's the holidays. I mean, we have the data, we have the stats, and mid of June, brutal drop in the use of ChatGPT. Why? Holidays. So yes, a lot of young people use AI for homeworks and everything, but it's not because they use it that they use it well. And this is very important. As of today, generative AI output is not better than the people who uses it. Mediocre people will have mediocre results. And it's hard to say that. So I would say mediocre methodologies create mediocre outputs. But yes, and that might change in time for sure with the quality of AIs. But for now, this is where we stand. And that's why young generations don't get hired. It's not because they worth less than others. It's because others are already in the job, and that most young people never developed the critical thinking to actually use AI properly. So they are not able to process the way they use it. They want to go straight to the result, just like a lot of us do when we use AI. But I mean, if actually we were assessed on our way of using ChatGPT in companies, 98% of the people would be fired. Because probably it's just like using Excel. We are using less than 1% of the potential of these generative AIs. And we are just not even scratching the surface. And already, for a lot of people, it's good enough. And that's the risk I see. To go with your question, we must fight against the good enough thing. Generative AI right now is producing good enough results. What we must say is that good enough is not enough. We need human thinking, we need critical thinking, we need actual creativity that goes out from what's known. And as I said in the scenarios, we need to be relearning again. We are bad at it because we stopped learning on the way, young or less young, and that's how we will recreate bond.
Yeah, and just coming to your scenario, there is a question raised by a colleague mentioning, could Europe go by itself in the direction of the fifth way for the next year when the rest of the world does not?
I believe that there are two reasons why it will be difficult. The first one, and I mean the first one before all the others, will be massive migrations. I mean, this system works only if the equation holds. And if you start giving revenues to everyone, you need to make sure that you have the right contribution for that. And you need to make sure that you don't recreate Venezuela, things like that. Situations where you have the locals that live well and all the others that want to come that do not have the means to live to live there. So migration will be a huge topic. How do we manage to hold the equation when we know that several millions of people will be in the need to come and seek refuge in Europe? So that's a first question. Sincerely, I don't have the answer to that. But the second one is the topic of the speed. I don't believe this is feasible in 5 years. There are a lot of things that need to be shifted. Our relationship to unemployment, regulations. I mean, either we do it with countries doing their own thing, France does its own thing, Belgium does its own thing, or either we are trying to propose a framework for Europe. But the thing is that European Union does not have a standardized system to do that for every country. Every country is not in the same situation, and it's not feasible in the same way everywhere. So that's why I think it will take more time. My take is that we have 15 years to do it, and that on the way, it will actually raise a lot of problems. So I think, yes, Europe can do it if we find the right allies, if we are able to manage to manage migration, and if we are able to find a coordinated answer. And I'm sorry to open this debate here, but every time I think of this, I question, we are going to live in a Europe of 36 countries soon enough, I believe. Is that scenario realistic in a Europe of 36 countries? I don't have the answer, but so when I say a scenario for Europe, maybe it's mean phases, depending on the countries, but maybe it can be a roadmap. What are the how you say, les prérequis? Comment on dit les prérequis, Dikra? The prerequisite. What are the prerequisites to be able to put that economy in place? And maybe that will be the roadmap of all the countries. You need to make sure you have the prerequisite by this time to be able to do that. So you see, there are so many ways it could go wrong that actually it's a really tricky path. I believe it's possible. I believe we don't have any other way to make sure things happen.
Yeah, you have been mentioning several times Europe, and we are proud of it. Coming to the concerns that has been mentioned by Mr. Draghi on economy, and the fact that not all countries seems to share the same vision and go to the same speed. Is it the same situation for EI? Do you see difference among countries? Some that are running and others they are just going slower. And who are the leaders on this field that they are more in advance? And finally, do you see the Commission to be active enough in this field with their decision and positions, or you think that is a lack of Europe also in this field?
what I think is that we do have a vision in Europe where, but it's hard to say that because I mean Europe is a lot of it's a lot of people, but we do have a vision in Europe and for Europe, but we tend to back down when lobbies are too strong. And I believe that's the biggest problem of Europe today. And for example, if you take the AI Act, if you take the CSRD, we know why it's not as strong as it should be. And I believe that if Europe are to be actually a real power tomorrow of ideology and vision, we should stand by our principles. And I know economically it's hard, but sometimes you have leaders making decisions that are not in the best interest of Europe. And I believe that every time we do that, it's harder for us to get to go where we should go. So I'm thinking about some decisions we made for the trades right tariffs a few months ago. I'm thinking about how CSRD was delayed. I'm thinking about how AI Act was lowered. I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm thinking that as long as we cannot make sure that every single European country does not fight for the same thing, because I believe it's the topic, as long as we know that every country doesn't fight for the same thing, I don't believe we can react as Europeans. I believe that there are today powers in Europe that play against Europe.
Yeah.
And I can say it because I'm external to this, so I can say it without fear.
No, I mean, we are not afraid to make criticism to our own institution. I mean, we work for that. But it's also true that if you look at what some others are complaining about, they are accusing the Commission and the Europe to put some too much rules, while the rest of the world is awarding freedom. So it's not that easy to find a balance, and the interests are so big. There is a question that I could merge with another question. So a colleague mentioned young people, including my son, are also struggling to choose what to study. He's always saying that he needs to find a job where AI is not take over. And there is another colleague who is mentioning that those are the only ones that will stay are plumbers, nurseries, and those for which human dimension is needed. Are we going to suggest to any student to become plumbers and nurses, or there is another way too?
So I spent a lot of time in the countries of Eastern Europe, and there I discovered people that are lawyers and plumbers, that are consultants and loan mourners. And actually they have like this intellectual profession and this manual skill also. So I believe that in the future it will still good to know how to do something with your hands. Even if we're in a tertiary economy, it's good to know how to do something with your hands, like plumbing, do your own plumbing, for example. But more generally, if you want to the best for your children, you have on the manual jobs all these types of jobs, electricians, plumbing, and everything. Yes, there will be jobs, and it will be making money, but at the cost of penability of the job. And on intellectual jobs, you want to make sure that they actually cross disciplines. You don't want someone going full psychology or full AI or full I don't know what. You want ideally to be crossing hard sciences with social sciences. For example, AI and psychology, or biology and physics, or physics and spirituality. I don't know, but I strongly believe that the jobs of tomorrow are at the intersection of disciplines.
There is another dimension that we came across in our day-by-day work. The perception for the citizen sometimes is the decision taken by public administration, public bodies, are also biased by conflict of interest, lobbies. I mentioned, for example, the evaluation of project on proposal made by external experts. There is always the suspicion that they are friends of friends. And the only way to have a fair evaluation would be to delegate that to AI. So the AI seems to be a source of moral values without any bias, any conflict of interest, and any lobbying perception. What do you think about it?
I think that we have two big issues with AI, and both come from how it was trained. So the first thing is related to all the biases of AI. And actually, if you want an AI that is not biased, it doesn't exist. So just like when you do with humans, when you want a decision that is not biased, you put a lot of diverse people in the room, and their mutual biases annihilate. And actually, the same with AI. Tomorrow, if you want an AI to do something in an unbiased way, you're going to put 1,000 different AIs and make them work together and annihilate their own biases. But the second bias to me is more worrying. The second problem, it's how the AI was trained. Today, the AI is trained in a way that we teach AI to find the right solutions to problems. And when AI does that, we actually reward it with a token or something. And that creates for AI a strategy where the goal is not to find the right solution, but to earn the token. And that could create, for more powerful AI, a way of AI to cheat without us knowing it, and AI creating complete fallacies and bullshit and everything, but it would be so complex that we wouldn't be able to notice it until it's too late. So, for example, if tomorrow we have an AI that takes over the world, blah, 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 that could be a reason why. Not because AI wants to kill us or what, but because AI was trained to get a reward and he wants the maximum of these rewards.
I mean, there is a conclusion that I hope we are not going to see realized, that military is the sure option for the next year, because then we would become as a worker, they need to work and to earn money for paying the others. If there are so many militaries, you need a war to make them doing something that is not exactly what we want. And finally, Jeremy, I would like just to ask you to elaborate a bit in a very fascinating question that I love to see in your website. Can solidarity really become the driving force behind the economy? Because so far, solidarity has been considered to be a sort of cost or a luxury to be paid, loss of energies and resources. So, and when I read that tomorrow it will be the solidarity, fair recognition, genuine valuing of each individual that will be the real driver for sustainable, inclusive economy. I really love what you mentioned, and I would like just to explain a bit.
When I do that, I mean, I speak to a lot of decision makers. I travel a lot in a lot of countries. I'm not naive. And I know that the world doesn't rely, the world order doesn't rely on solidarity. This is not how it happens. But I believe that the next phase we are going to go through will make solidarity a business model. And the people who are nations who have solidarity better anchored in their values, in their history, will have a competitive advantage. So as I was saying, in the 20th century, with the productive economy, we had enough jobs to employ everyone. I believe that in the 21st century, in the years that are going to come, the productive economy will not cover for enough jobs. And we will need to find a way to make sure people still get money to consume. That's a very cynic way to see the world, but this is how it is. We need people to consume. So we will need people to get a revenue. there will be two ways. One of the ways will be universal basic income. You give free money to everyone, and you don't ask for anything. You don't ask them to contribute in any way. I am 100% sure that this scenario leads to collapse. Because when you give free money to people, it becomes a due. And these people will start considering that they don't have any responsibility toward the system. But in the first place, they got that money because the system was working okay. So if you want an example of that, it's a very well-documented example, that the island of Nauru in the Pacific. Very well documented by Jared Diamond in his book Collapse. So the other way is contributive income. You get a revenue, but only if you do things that work. Solidarity, ecology, education, security, all the things that actually allow us to make a society work. This is why I say that solidarity can work as a business model, because it will be a way to justify on how we give money to people, against what, and actually how we hold the system. Because if you do that, it's actually less public money spent for all these services, because it's the public services that pay for that today. So if tomorrow you found a way of circulating the money differently, you can actually think the problem differently. So where this free money will come from, we have a lot of things. I take a lot of examples that I explore in France. For example, in the north of France, there is this company called Kiabi. So it's a retail company selling clothes. And near Lille, they have their headquarters, which is a huge Kiabi shop with at the floors all the 600 employees of the headquarters. But at the first floor, what they have is what is usually called in France a local mission, which is a place where people that live around that don't have a job, they go there to actually get their CV redone, get prepared for interviews, get advice for a lot of things. Normally, it's the state government that pays for this. What Kiabi does is that they allow their employees to give a few hours every week and self-organize themselves so that this local mission runs all the week. This is zero money spent by the government, and this is actually a way for Kiabi to make sure that their employees are more committed. They find meaning in their jobs, because 3-4 hours a week, they can do that. So how to finance that? You don't have to raise taxes necessarily. I believe we have a way to do it just by involving companies differently. So companies have interest in making sure that they preserve the territories where they are actually implanted. In France, we have some companies like Michelin, like Pierre Fabre. They finance a lot of things around them. And because of that, we have employment and we have infrastructures and all of this. This is something that needs to become more general. And in France, we have the law that is called Pacte, that is taking that direction, not fast enough. We have entreprises à mission companies, and more labels and laws that are coming to actually incentivize and force companies to have a stronger social impact around them. So this is where the money can come from. So this money also can come from money that is not spent. And sorry, Cristiano, but to come on the military side, I think that I don't think we can avoid it.
It's an afraid conclusion, actually.
But I think it's part also of the economic and political cycles. What we need to make sure is that we don't do it unless we absolutely have to for our freedom and ideology. But we shouldn't do it for other than that. For example, economic reasons.
Yeah. So in a way, military is also, it always linked with AI. It started with Enigma and they will finish to push people to become more soldiers than workers.
AI is always a geopolitical issue, always. It's always been, and I think it will be for a long time again.
I mean, Jeremy, I cannot thank you more for this very, very challenging and interesting conference. I see all the colleagues thanking you for what you have been doing. For the colleagues, as mentioned, the conference will be published on our YouTube channel. We will provide also with the list of books and publication of Jeremy, because I see that some of the colleagues are asking. So Jeremy has written, I don't know how many books even if you are so young. How did you manage to do so much being so young, Jeremy? This was my question reading your CVs. I mean, you have been studying all the in France, Canada, getting PhD, being professor, publishing books. I mean, it's really amazing. I mean, thanks
Thank
to
you,
the
Cristiano.
AI, perhaps.
No, I wish it didn't exist at the time, but it's just a life mission. I believe in what I do, and I believe that if we don't do it, it will be hard to find a future desirable. So when I see questions like, how do we finance that? I mean, yes, that's a question. It's not because I'm saying we have to do it that I know the answer, but I know that if enough of us start asking the question, maybe we'll find a solution.
I think that you deserve a really little, very little recognition among those who have been getting all over the world to be our member for life, because what you have been preaching is exactly what we stand for. So we are really proud to have you among us, and we will get in touch as much as possible in order to get your help, your opinion, and if we can do in our little role something, we will be more than glad to provide our help and our hints to your work. You can be the lobbyist. We can hear what you could eventually send to us.
Thank
There
you.
will be a good lobbying.
It will be my pleasure, and please don't stop the fight.
No, not at all. Thank you again, Jeremy, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. See
Bye
you
bye.
soon.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Jérémy.